Hello! Hello, 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 hello. There we go. I want stuff playing through other things. Alright. That should be all the setup. Good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream for tonight. Hello, Oni-I, Ruler Skull TCG, what is up? So today I'll be going over the spoilers from the previous week. I did it on Friday. I prepared for you people. Don't think you'll get me. I've prepared for this. So we're going to be going over the spoiler sets from the previous week, and then I'm going to go into my thoughts about the ban list a little bit later, because I know that's what most people probably want to listen to anyway. But we'll start with spoilers, and then we'll do ban list talk a little bit later. We don't have as many spoilers to go over, because it's only been a week. But yeah, so there we go. So anyway, getting right on into it. We'll actually we'll do this. We'll have the scroll. There we go. That works. Okay. This is just everyone's favorite database, Force of Wind .online. I just opened tabs for all of the cards, and the 2 new ones weren't up yet, so I just copied their links from Discord. So we'll just start off. It'll just be in basically alphabetical and then color order, minus the 2 red cards that got spoiled today. And I'll just give my thoughts on each one. So sorted by new spoilers coming later today. Excellent, excellent. So anyway, we got the second of our new 12 Olympian gods, right? We didn't originally have... Well, we only had one, right? We had Neptune, so we had an idea of how they were going to function, but we only had Neptune, so we didn't know how the rest of them were going to work, what they were going to do. Apollon is interesting. From what we've seen, all the new 12 Olympian gods will have some form of the enter, or when it's revealed by an enter ability of Order of the Olympians, you get their effect. So for Apollon, he has you remove a non-magic stone, non-J resonator entity your opponent controls from the game. So it's something like an addition. That's it, right? A regalia, an addition, stuff like that. So he can hit niche things that might not necessarily have removal all the time. It is also quick cast, so you can do it at instant speed. And then he has Union 7, which means if there are 7 or more, I believe, unique named of the race that is in between the bars, revealed in your public zone, in all public zones, so that's field, graveyard, removed from game area, or revealed from outside of the game, you gain the effects underneath Union 7. And so we've seen this for Union 7 New 12 Olympian Gods and Union 7 Machine. Apollon's is he gains Flying, Eternal, and Barrier, and then J Resonators you control gain +10/+10. We'll see how good this truly is. It's very good in terms of like a kind of board ender. The issue that I could potentially see is specifically with new 12 Olympian gods, we don't really have a way for them to grave dump easily, at least not yet. We might get that in the future, but the thing that the machine version of Union 7 has going for it is that a lot of the machine stuff is very focused around sending itself to the grave, doing other things like that. The other thing is they printed a lot of cards that just have machine as a race or trait, including chance and other things like that. So there are just more machines than there will be new 12 Olympian gods. So my issue with potentially the Union 7 effect for new 12 Olympian gods specifically is how easy it'll be to get 7 of them. You'll have one in the form of either your ruler, because I believe your ruler zone counts as a public zone. Yeah, it should count as a public zone. And Union 7 specifically says public zones. It doesn't list like field, grave, etc. So you'll have one from your ruler or when you do judgment, because the order of Zeus makes the card a new 12 Olympian god. So you'll have one from there, but then you'll have to find the other 6, right? So if you can find that other 6 easily, then those Union 7 effects are going to be very powerful. If you can't find it easily, the new 12 Olympian gods ones might not be as impactful as, say, the machine ones. I will say, though, from what we have seen of them, like with Neptune real quick, like Neptune's Union 7 is draw 3 and then put a new 12 Olympian from your hand into field. Apollon's is J Resonators get huge and probably you kill your opponent. So theirs seem a lot more impactful than the machine ones will be, which makes me think that they're going to be a lot harder to activate the Union 7 on. within a quick period of time, right? But otherwise, again, RFG is pretty decent. Like Halo said in chat, hitting things that have Eternal is pretty relevant, considering a lot of stuff has Eternal now. And then him just gaining Eternal and Barrier is pretty powerful, especially the +10/+10 as well. So it's a 16/17 with Eternal and Barrier, which is incredibly hard to kill. Moving on. The Light of Zeus. So this is the second of the 5 Zeus element cards that we've seen. And this one is, I believe, a board wipe. So it's 2 CMC, light, and then any number of target entities gain Eternal until end of turn. Players cannot chase to this card. And then if you are Zeus, you also do a board wipe. The other thing with Light of Zeus, in Zeus specifically, is that you get to give all your J Resonators Eternal before you actually nuke the board. So it functions as a one-sided board destruction effect at instant speed that can't be responded to. It has split second if you've played Magic. The other thing is with the whole loop that the element Zeus powers do. You could play this card for free in Zeus if you have one of the other elements in your grave already. So it's almost a 0 mana one-sided board wipe that can't be chased to, which is quite impactful. Just play a single 7 lands and extra Olympian inside, GG easy. That will probably be what people do. I could see that be very impactful. Yes, Halo did forget the players cannot chase to this card text. Disgrace. Didn't upload the spoilers, forgot part of the text. Absolutely ridiculous. But but anyway, one-sided board wipe, and the fact that it gives Eternal for the whole turn, right? It's not just like you nuke your opponent's board, right? There is a pretty big difference between giving your whole board Eternal and then nuking the board versus just nuking the board, right? Or just nuking your opponent's board. And the fact that it can't be chased to. So, very impactful card. You probably don't play this outside of Zeus, but it's very quickly becoming that all of the Zeus element cards are very, very powerful. The water one is pretty powerful. I think it's like a +3 in Odin, or not in Odin, in Zeus. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's a +2. I'd have to reread the card. It's been a minute. But also the fact that they just loop through themselves and allow you to keep playing them. And then also you could potentially see is if you have any form of recursion in Zeus, whether that's RFG to grave or grave to hand or both, it'll allow you to keep looping these very powerful effects, right? Thor, Reincarnated God of Thunder. So it's kind of hard to evaluate Thor fully because we don't know what Thialfi does and we don't know what Roskva does. So I don't know how impactful his Revolution Enter effect is. If look, there it is. He's done it. But so I don't know how impactful his Revolution Enter is. It could be, I mean, depending on what Thialfi and Roskva do, it could be as impactful as Hanzo's. It could be practically useless, just getting 3 Resonators. We just don't know. We just don't know what the cards do, right? So we'll wait on that text. The other part is you can rest 3 recovered J's you control, J Resonators you control, to search your deck for a card named Thor's Hammer, and then you get to put it into your hand. And then whenever you play Thor's Hammer, he gets +10/+10 Swiftness, Precision, and Pierce. They love giving cards Precision and Pierce in the last few sets. I don't know why. But so he just gets large, and then you also get Thor's Hammers. The other thing, Rev at the bare minimum at least gets you 3 J-Res to activate the Thor's Hammer. That is true, as he is allowed to, if you're unfamiliar, activated effects that require a cost to rest are different than actual rest effects on the Resonator, so, or J-Ruler. So you are allowed to activate Thor's effect and rest himself and other cards, even though they just came into play that turn, in order to do the Thor's Hammer search. And then Thor's Hammer, we do know what this is. So you reveal the top card of your deck and you destroy all J Resonators your opponent controls with total cost X. It's not X or less, it is just X. And then X is the cost of the revealed card, and then you draw a card. So it replaces itself and then does like a quasi board nuke. And then you can play Thor's Hammer as if it had quick cast, as long as you have a Thor, and you get to pay 1 less. So it's 1 mana, potential board wipe, off of just if you have Thor in play. Because of what it does, the reveal the top card of your deck part, my assumption of what Tealfi and Roskva do is Tealfi lets you look at the top card of your deck, or this is like either one. So like one of Tealfi or Roskva lets you look at the top card of your deck, and the other one lets you potentially filter the top card of your deck. So you can kind of choose how you want to like stack your deck, basically. That would be my guess on what they're doing. Because otherwise you're just kind of throwing out a gamble on like the board wipe effect, and then it's just a draw card and then a pump for Thor. So we'll see what they actually do when they get spoiled. But that would be my guess for them right now. Without being able to know what the top card of your deck is, Thor's Hammer isn't as impactful. Because again, it's not X or less. If it was X or less, you could just play it in something like Odin, for example, and then just reveal a Mistletoe, and then all of a sudden your opponent's whole board is gone, right? But now, like, no one's playing 7 drops, right? So having a Mistletoe on top wouldn't be as good. So we'll see. We'll see about Thor. He does have Natural Quick Cast, which is pretty good. Natural Quick Cast is always good. Except in Wanderer. He'd be better if he was 2 mana sorcery speed in Wanderer. Hilariously enough. Dragon Crystal. So Dragon Crystal, in addition, enter, draw a card. You can pay X, where X is the number of times you already played this ability that game. You can do this as many times as you want per turn. So it is a mana sink, and you get to burn your opponent for 200, or you get to burn a J Resonator for 200. So you get 200 free damage, and then you pay 1 for 200 more, 2 for 200 more, 3 for 200 more, right? And then if you are Dragon Flame, you can pay 2 to make it an XX Dragon Resonator with flying, where X is your dragon power. It is still an addition. It's nice that it draws a card, it replaces itself, and it's just like a kind of filter for burn. The big issue is it doesn't say per turn. X is the number of times you already played this ability per turn. It's per game. So you'll get some free burn in, but it won't be a lot. And you'd have to kind of see the rest of like Dragon Flame, I guess. So the weird thing is because you're allowed to target a player, right? So like if we go back to Zhu Liang, where's Dragon Crystal? So like we go back to Zhu Liang, whenever an effect deals damage to you, you produce red, right? So like you get to shoot yourself with Zhu Liang in play, and then it's 0 mana, but then you have to pay 1 mana into it, and then 2 mana, and then 3 mana, and then keep going just for 200 damage, where there's probably more impactful things you could be doing with your mana than trying to burn. The other thing is it just becoming a resonator for 2 will, where X is reliant on your dragon power. We've seen that you can get a fair amount of dragon power pretty quickly, but nothing that would make it a strong enough resonator in order to justify the 2 mana and the 1 mana spent into it. So it just kind of depends, really. Something to do with all that moon will, that is true. So this is potentially abusable. However, I don't think it's super impactful in the grand scheme of things, and I don't think you'll end up seeing most people play it. And then its effect for just what Dragonflame is, I think Dragonflame's trying to do better stuff. So I just don't think you really play this in Dragonflame. Maybe, but I don't think so. Pang Tong, Awakening Phoenix. Red, deals X damage to each J Resonator your opponent controls, where X is your dragon power, and then you can pay 2 to gain 5 dragon power, and then this card deals 500 damage to each player, and then if it's revolutioned on enter, you double your dragon power. That enter's actually pretty relevant, because even if you have 0 dragon power, you immediately go to 10 if you revolution this. Which 10 is, like, I think the sweet spot you want to be in. Like, I think you want to hit 10 as soon as possible, and then anything after that is, like, kind of overkill. Where you just actually have too much power. So Pang Tong's probably pretty good. The fact that it's 2 mana always to do a 500 burn, it is both ways, but if you have, like, Zhu Liang, right, it's only 1 mana and you're only taking 200. So I mean that's pretty good, and since it's increasing your dragon power like over and over again, like if you keep paying the one, like you just let's say you have excess red mana, right? It's like turn 4 or something like that. This isn't even, you have a Zeus Liang revved. Every time you pay 2, you get 1 red mana back, and then you go up 5 dragon power, and then your opponent takes 500 damage. But Zeus Liang is also going to get plus 500, plus 500. So every 1 mana you spend is 1,000 damage, effectively. Which is really strong, right? So we'll see. I feel like you probably play Peng Tong if you're playing Dragonflame. It seems like the kind of card the deck would want. Whether or not it's like a 4/0 or whatever, we'll see. Mechanization. So this is one of the instances I kind of talked about where they're making chance machines. They're giving them traits. So this is destroy a... It truly is Luffy. It's kind of absurd. But so you have destroy target machine J resonator you control, and then you search your deck for a non-champ machine with total cost equal to the total cost of the card destroyed this way, put it into play, put 6 1/1 counters on it, shuffle your deck. If this card becomes revealed from outside the game, you draw a card. So all the machine cards that are in blue that they've been giving us are really funny because they synergize so well with the like machine infinite basically. And it makes machines potentially like an interesting deck for like Wanderer, whether or not that's Typhon machines, which I mean you can't really play Mechanization in Typhon and have to be in your sideboard, but like or like old Machina or new Machina, stuff like that. Like there are a lot of ways to like loot machine stuff out, right? So like going into the next card immediately, right? We have Mechanized Fender, blue and 1. Yes, the flavor text is a meme. We'll get into that in a second. But it is a machine. So it's a 2-drop machine, and when it's destroyed, you search your deck for a machine, reveal it, put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle your deck, and you can Typhon text. It's also a skill drain if you play Yu-Gi-Oh! Non-machine J resonators your opponent controls lose all abilities. Very impactful. I'd have to look at the CR. I think cards come into play with this active, so I'm pretty sure this blanks enters. I'd have to recheck. I don't want to say that without knowing 100%, but I'm pretty sure it also blanks enters. But very impactful effect. To be revved, right? And so it is a villain, so you get locked out of tails, so like maybe the machine stuff that new Machina is doing. But like if you Mechanization a Fenrir, right, you get to search your deck for a 2-drop and put it into play, and then also search your deck for another machine and add it to your hand. So like you can do let me use Force of Wind online. Legionus? I think it's Machine Lab of Legionus. Yeah, this card. So this, on enter, put target machine with total cost 2 or less from your grave into the field. So if you Mechanization a Fenrir, you can put this into play, adds another Mechanization to your hand because it's a machine, and this does not say machine resonator, it just says machine. And like add another Mechanization, and then this gets back the Fenrir, and then you can do it again if you have the blue mana. And then you can just keep going through that kind of a loop as long as you want to get however many machines into play that you want to, and then play the cost reduction machine cards that are basically affinity for Magic, right? Remote Control Beast, Maria Bello's Work, Remote Control Golem, etc., etc. And then kind of play off of that. There are potential other lines that you can do. So it's Mechanization as well as Mechanized Fenrir are very impactful for like a machine-centric kind of get the combo cards that you need, etc., etc. I mean, I haven't looked too much into it. You might be able to, with a Mechanized Fenrir and a Mechanization, get to the Guinevere Machine Lab of Legionus Infinite, like, pretty easily. So I'd have to check. I haven't been deck building recently. I've been practicing for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Regional. I know I am the absolute worst. But it does open up a lot of neat options for a machine-style Wanderer variant, which I'm personally excited to see. Moving on, Gil Lapis, Vampire Guardian. Darkness, Tails, Quick Cast. Already great. Put the top 4 cards of your deck into your graveyard, then put a Resonator from your graveyard into your hand. Revolution, you get X+1/+1 counters, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard, and your opponent loses life and negs their board. So you neg your opponent's board, and they lose life, where Y is the number of counters on Gil. Okay, sorry, I had to... So at minimum, he's going to give your opponent's board -3/-3. Unless you hit no Resonators, then he'll give your opponent's board -4/-4 off of his mill effect. So I have mixed feelings about Gil Lapis. The reason I have mixed feelings about Gil Lapis is Dredge and like self-mill and stuff like that are by far my favorite game mechanics in any card game. Dredge was the deck I played in Modern the most for Magic. The deck I currently play in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like a self-mill type thing where you just send like 30 cards from your deck to the grave on the first turn. I love self-mill. I love making your graveyard a resource. So I really like this card. Whether or not it's good enough is another question. Because he's a very good resource recursion, right? So like you get a Resonator that you want, right? This is any Resonator. It doesn't have to be any of the stuff you milled. It's just any Resonator in your graveyard. So even if it's stuff that's gone to the grave earlier, stuff you sacked off, stuff that got there from other mill effects, things like that, it can just be whatever you kind of want. It has that form of versatility. It also does, again, function as a board wipe. The one thing that I'm worried about is with the like plus X, the X100 and 100 counters. With Athenia, which is kind of what I'm assuming this is designed for, you want to flip back and forth as much as humanly possible. Or at least have the ability to flip back and forth at will. This doesn't give you that inherently, so you would have to find another way to potentially flip back. Now we have other cards, right? We have the Brad cards, we have stuff like that. Starving Beast, right? Which you could add back to your hand. But this doesn't inherently do that, necessarily. So, Brad cards are in color for her. That is true. She is Jund. She is red, black, green. So we shall see. Feels like a quick cast order and then undo on your turn. Potentially, yeah, to do it on your opponent's turn. The only issue is a lot of the times with quick cast order, right, is you would have to have had something already pre-ordered and then killed it on your turn anyway, in order to have that stone, so you're not going down on stones, right? Or have like a Ragnarok stone or something like that. What is up, Ifizz? Hello. But so we'll see. The self-mill function is super important. It's what Athenia wants. We've seen other cards that function off of the graveyard, so having a self-mill card that isn't just like harvesting season is very good. Whether or not Gil Lapis is impactful enough is yet to be determined, because 2-mana quick cast isn't great. It can be revved, right? It can be ordered, so like it can get around stuff like that. But we'll just have to wait and see. Board wipes are also very powerful. So I just need to see the rest of her mill cards. I don't think Gil is the most impactful one. I think there should be something more. But continuing on. Makage Shinjuro. So he has Flying Drain, he is Darkness, and 7. As you play this card, you may remove any number of cards in your grave from the game. You can pay 1 less to play them for each card removed this way. Delve. Or you can pay Darkness, discard him, put the top 3 cards of your deck into your grave. So that's the kind of effect I want to see more of. I want to see more instant speed mill myself. Is 3 cards impactful enough? 3 cards might be impactful enough. Let's see. If you do this on 1, right, you put 4 cards into grave effectively, Makage Shinjuro and 3 others. And then if you do Gil on 2, you do 4 into grave and then 1 more out, so it would be 4, 8, 7. So you'd give your opponent's board -7, and Gil would be a 14/14. My only concern with this is anti-value, right? You just go -1 by playing this effect. So you'd need your graveyard effects to be impactful immediately. So we'll see. And then Revolution, once per turn during your turn, you may play a Resonator from your removed area. Pretty decent effect, especially since he's removing everything, right? And then that functionally will send them back to the grave, and then they can be removed again. So it kind of Makage Shinjuro kind of creates like a resource loop as long as he's Revolutioned, to allow you to kind of like keep going, right? Yeah, I like this card. You probably play 4 of this in Athenia, right? Like, you probably play 4 of this. You probably play 4 Gil Lapis. I just wish they milled more cards. That discard does slightly less than Adam's. Only slightly, only slightly. Yeah, and then, oh, what's his stat line? Oh, he's a 15/15. It's pretty big. Necromancer of Ma'at. Treat this card in your graveyard or removed area as 4 cards while paying costs of spells or abilities you control. So, I mean, costs include, right, the cost up there. So, like, Makage Shinjuro's, if you remove her from your grave, she counts as 4 cards, right? So it would be like -4, so you'd only have to remove 3 other cards to make them just cost 1 darkness. Stuff like that. We have learned that you can't go over cost with her. So, like, for example, with cards like Death Scythe or Electo that say remove 3 Resonators or 3 cards or whatever from your grave in order to get their effect, this is not 3 cards, it's 4 cards, which means it's more cards, which means you can't remove it for their effect. We do know that. Other than that, I don't think there is anything else weird about Necromancer. I think that was our main question with Necromancer, and that got answered. Halo can correct me if I'm wrong, though. But good for the deck, right? You're doing, like, the resource loop here. It'll function with Athenia enters the Game of Gods. If I go back. Like, Athenia enters the Game of Gods, right? You may remove... Oh, this says up to 3 cards. Oh god, it doesn't even work with this. Chug. Oh god. We'll see other effects that it'll work with, hopefully, in the future. Not just Makage Shinjuro. I honestly don't remember what Obo's effect is. Yeah, okay, it doesn't really function off of that. That's not cost. Oh well, we'll see. We'll see what else happens. Currently, it's mainly Makage Shinjuro that it functions with. But, oh, isn't paying a cost? But she doesn't count as 4, right? She would only count as 1, because she only treats herself for costs, right? Treat this card as 4 cards while paying costs. Yeah, okay. So she'd just be 1 card. I more meant to, like, pay, like, full value, basically. Can't even work with her GOG, not enough R&D foresight. Yeah, I mean, like Halo said, like, you can still use it, it's just not, you're just not getting full value, right? You'd have to have other stuff. Incarnation? Incarnation? Excalibur reincarnation? But yeah, and then Tree Decay. So a single darkness. Your opponent discards a card. If your Force Resonance Death, which I believe Death is her front side. Oh god, I have to look up so many cards. Death is her front side. So if she is unflipped, you can play this play this card without paying its cost if you don't control another card with its name. And then you can remove X cards in your grave from the game. Your opponent loses X 100 life. Oh, it works for Tree. Okay. So you can remove her. She counts as 4 cards. That's fun. You burn your opponent for 800 by removing 2. That's kind of funny. But we'll you'll probably play this in Athenia. I don't think you play 4 of this in Athenia. You probably play, I don't know, 2 or 3. It's nice. It's just a 1-for-1 immediately, but it's also 0 mana. So it's similar to Tears of the Fallen in Lucifer, or like Lich back in Alice Origins, but it's not random. Your opponent gets to pick what they want to discard. Invitation to Valhalla with Necromancer and Healing Robot. Sounds awful. But yeah, so those are all the spoilers that I haven't gone over, I believe, because the last ones that had been spoiled were Shaka and the Shaka chant. So I believe that's everything that has been spoiled since last week. If it isn't, you can yell at me and I'll go over some of the other cards in the future. Okay. Oh wait, these 2 cards that Halo didn't add. Right. The 2 red cards that I had open in 2 other tabs. So Daji, mass-produced Queen, a single red quick cast machine. You can search your deck for a dragon, reveal it, and put it into your grave. If you do, shuffle your deck. If you reveal a dragon this way, this card deals 500 plus an additional X to your opponent, where X is the amount of life your opponent gained this turn. So it's anti-life gain, which is nice against like Lumia and stuff like that. It's almost more impactful than something like Rogue Spectator. But Rogue Spectator is in your sideboard, basically, and can be used at any point, where this would have to be in your hand. And your opponent cannot gain life, so it also has the life effect. Therein, I don't believe you. And then it has tap, destroy target machine, J resonator you control. If you do, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. So what would this be effectively good for? It would be good for like red-blue machine villains, I guess. With like the Mechanized Fender stuff that we've seen already. You could potentially run it with Violet stuff, but Violet's been more focused on atoms and less on the machine portion, right? Like, you have Tiny Violets, you have improved healing robots, you have improved burning robots. I think Maria Bella herself might be a machine. But yeah. The other thing is this card does require you to kill the thing that you target. And it does target. It's not like Guinevere, which sacked as cost. So that's kind of funny. But it is kind of like a value engine. And then if you Revolution this card, you can put a dragon from your grave into your hand. I think this also has Guinevere's stat lines, so that's kind of funny. I don't know. I'd have to see what other kind of like dragons you would run, like what kind of machine dragon deck. Like the only thing I'm thinking of, because like this is weird, right? Because you can't play this in Typhon, which is like the machine / dragon deck. So you're playing this in some other deck. And it would be like Dragon Flame, right? Because like red and dragons. But then you have to kill machines? And then you're playing a machine? So like, are you playing like red, blue dragon machines with like Dragon Flame? I guess we'll see. But I don't know, it just seems a little weird. But we'll see what ends up happening. And then Tiger and Dragon, giant futuristic weapon. I guess this is another dragon machine that functions because of dragon power. So I guess that's what they're going for. Dragon machines with Dragon Flame. It gets XX, where X is your dragon power, and then you can pay 3 less to play it if your dragon power is 20 or more. 20 seems a little hard to hit unless you do like, you get a revolution off early and then you get a Pang Tong on like your next revolution on like the following turn. That'll put you at 20 and get you there pretty quick, but then you have to pay 3 into the next turn. So I guess this is kind of like curving out, right? Like it wants you to Zeus Liang on 1, Pang Tong on 2, like revved Zeus Liang on 1, revved Pang Tong on 2, and then revved this on 3, right? That's what I'm feeling here. Or you can pay red, discard this card. This card deals X 100 to target J-Res, where X is your dragon power, and you draw a card. It's actually a pretty decent effect, not gonna lie. It functioning more as a removal piece that also gives you card advantage, and then kind of serving as like a end game, like boss kill your opponent type deal, is a lot more impactful and better than I thought it would be. Because its enter is this color deals damage equal to its attack to your opponent. So like, if assuming most of the time you're paying 3 for this, you're going to deal 20 at least, which, I mean, that's a lot of damage. 20 is a lot of damage, especially in a red deck on turn 3, right? Like, 20s, your opponent's probably dead. Unless they're Typhon. So, and then Flying Pierce. So it's just a big boy, hits for a lot, and then also just cycles and deals, has like board control. Which, I mean, I can't complain. Pretty good. So you potentially play this in Dragonflame. I'd have to see the rest of Dragonflame's cards. Dragonflame is really fucking weird, but that gives you 10 immediately and draws a card. That is also 2 mana. And a chant, not a resonator. So, take that. But anyway, okay, so that is all the spoilers. All right, let me open this up on this other screen, because I talked about this with some people, and then I haven't really thought too much about it. That is penalty guidelines. I feel like I talked more about this. I feel like I wrote more down than just a cards that should be banned thing. Fautier Friday stuff? Nope, it isn't Friday stuff. Top 10, mag groups, guidance, Friday stuff. No, I guess it's just cards that should be banned. Alright. Okay. So ban lists, right? This is kind of just going to be me talking, so I'm just going to turn this back to my face, my lovely face, right? I don't really need to show you anything that I'm kind of talking about. I'm just going to kind of keep this on my screen. So, we love to talk about ban lists. Everyone loves to talk about ban lists in every card game, right? If people don't like a format, people typically want something banned. A lot of the times, people don't like a format if something is either too powerful, something's too dominant, or if they just don't like the kind of format that you're in, right? So, like, even, for example, if, like, there are 3 good decks, right? It's called a rock, paper, scissors format. So if there are 3 good decks, deck A beats deck B but loses to deck C, deck B beats deck C but loses to deck A, and then deck C beats deck A but loses to deck B, right? So, like, it just goes around. A lot of people don't like those kinds of formats. Some people do. Some people don't like tier 0 formats, which is there is only one good deck, it's the best deck. You better be playing that deck if you're, like, even trying to win remotely. Some people don't like those kinds of formats. But so typically whenever those kinds of things come up, we get talks about people wanting more bans, right? This should be banned, X should be banned, Y should be banned. However, what it really comes down to is what is old, like back in Baja Blast days. Exactly. A lot of people didn't like how fast Baja was. A lot of people didn't like R&R, right? But back in R&R's time, technically R&R was a tier 0 ruler, right? You could make any deck, and then if you just slapped R&R on top of it, your deck was already better. Didn't matter what your ruler was. R&R just made it better. The thing with R&R, though, is that even though your ruler was determined, like, ahead of time, basically, the deck difference, like the amount of viable decks that you could play with R&R was tremendous. You had Stealth, you had Necrolance, you had 4 Sacred Beasts, you had Little Matchstick Control, like there were so many. You had Beasts, R&R Beasts, R&R Fairies, like there were so many different R&R decks you could make. Gwyber Turbo, like Alice World Turbo with R&R. The issue that people had was it was just all Reflect Refrain. And so that's why people didn't really like that format. And then when you moved into the next format, the Fox Prisia deck, so like red-green Prisia, Fox, and all that stuff, you had Prisia at the top kind of dominating, and then Fox got Demonic Dead, and then Fox began to become the deck that could beat Prisia, because Prisia also got Lave banned simultaneously, right? So Lave got banned, and then Fox got Demonic Dead. So Fox became probably the best deck percentage-wise, but Prisia could potentially beat Fox. The other thing is you could make a control deck, a hard control deck that could just clap Fox every day of the week. However, if you made a hard control deck, you lost to Prisia 95% of the time. There, you had like no chance. And that was a rock, paper, scissors format. So we went from kind of like a ruler tier 0, but it was only the ruler, but the decks were like variant, to this rock, paper, scissors format. To after that, we went to fair control, right? Or not fair control, but like black fair and like Wyber fair and like those decks. And then, which had like Otherworld Dreams and Severing Winds, right? This is when Severing Winds came out, or right before. And then after that, like right after Fairer, we had Shahrazad, which was a tier 0 format. And then it's kind of, the formats have kind of been a little bit weird. I kind of stopped playing the game as well. So I've not really caught up with the times after that. I know there was like Time Spinning Witch meta, Gil meta, etc., but I didn't really play in those directly. But anyway, the formats always kind of shift into one of those typical categories. It's very rare that you get a format where there are a bunch of different playable decks there, where it's not just like a rock, paper, scissors type deal, where tier 2 is viable, tier 1.5 is viable, etc. The most recent one in my memory is in Yu-Gi-Oh! It was called Eternal format, right? Which I believe was 2018 or 2019. There were 4 like best decks, right? There was Sky Strikers, there was Thunder Dragons, there was Salamangreat, and then there was Orcust. There were 4 decks that were all just at the top. You could play any 4 of them, and you had the potential to win an event. And they were like the tier 1 decks, and people really enjoyed that format because the decks also weren't broken. They were inherently fair within the scheme of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the decks at the time. They were the best, but they were not degenerate, effectively. So looking at our ban list, right? They have taken a more slowish approach. So they've looked at kind of the format, what we've had. We haven't really had events, so they've kind of just had to take their own internal testing and data that they've collected themselves for the past few ban lists, which have included, if we look at basically new frontiers, like dominant lists for the past half a year, you get Carlina, you get Feasting Mujdart, you get Lycion decks, and then you move into Wander, and then the weird one in Wander was you had Electo, right? So all those decks get banned, and what they've pretty much done on each of these ban lists is they take the top deck and then axe it, right? They don't really hit a lot of other stuff. Sometimes they'll unban some things, right? Like, I mean, I'll pull up the ban list so I can look at it. But, so like sometimes they'll ban some stuff, but a lot of the times they will just take whatever the top deck is at the time and then just kind of axe something in that and then see where the format goes, right? Which is a fair way to ban 4 cards. However, what a ban list like that unfortunately does, where you just cut the top deck off, is it doesn't necessarily address the problem that may be inherent in the format, right? So, for example, if you take like Electo, right? Like Electo was still performing within Feasting, within like Feasting existing, within Carlina existing, so on and so forth. And so they got rid of Feasting, Lycion, Carlina, etc., and then naturally the next step is Electo just became the best deck. So now we have like our more data. We've had the NA event this weekend. We'll have some EU events. I think there's an event in Mexico, and I think there's an event in EU. So I think there's 2 events this weekend for Wander. And so we'll see what people play there. But what we kind of found, and if you check my last video that I did for this, for the tournament report for the online Grand Prix, was we had, if you look at just percentages of decks that made top 16, Dante Belial just kind of swept. I think it had like a 75% conversion rate among the players playing, right? Like it was just amazing. Mylest Mujdart, those 2 had a 50% conversion rate. And then one of those decks ended up winning, and the other deck got third. The other deck, the deck that didn't have a great conversion rate but did well in the tournament, was a second place Odin list, right? So when we take a look at all that data, you kind of have to compile it and think, well, what would be the top deck? If we consider the top deck is going to be Myless Mujdart, right? And a lot of people don't like that deck because it's very reminiscent of Yu-Gi-Oh! It lets you play through certain things with Phantasmal, Ascendant, free mana off of Myless, Energize, etc., etc. What would you kind of hit in that, right? The obvious answer is like the engines, right? ISIS, things like that, etc., that prevent you from spitting out those cards. The less obvious things are kind of where Force of Will kind of messed up, in my opinion. And I've said it in a lot of my past videos, and it's part of the reason why Feasting and Carlina got banned, and part of the reason why I would always say that they were like the best rulers, is because cheating mana is like the best thing you can do in this game. If you have any effects that don't require any form of mana to generate you mana, those effects are just insane. They're just absurdly broken, for the most part, right? Sometimes they can be attached to something that's just irrelevant and does not matter, but the most obvious example being Excalibur Genesis. A single extra light will does not do a whole lot. However, because of that single extra light will and Magic Stone of the Six Sages, you could set up a hand to OTK your opponent in Excalibur Genesis because of that extra light will. Just came back. What did you miss? You didn't miss a whole lot. We're just getting into the ban list talk. Mainly my thoughts on stuff and cheating mana. So what? If we take a look at Myless Muj, right, what is the deck inherently doing for mana, right? So you have Myless, right? So Myless is giving you an extra free red will to start off the game. And then you have the Nyarlathotep cards. The Nyarlathotep cards are fine in design, I think. I'd have to... I might be wrong on that, but in my opinion, I think those cards are fine in design. I think kind of where they went wrong was Phantasmal Ascendant being a Cthulhu. Because you have Umarat to will, Umar allows you to effectively pitch a card in order to produce extra will, right? And so that kind of gameplay allows me to, well, I have one extra red will from my Myless. If I go second, I have extra Energize, either red or blue. I have whatever stone I call, and then by pitching 2 cards out of my 7-card hand, mind you, because I went second and I'm Mujdart. So now I'm down to 5 cards, which is how much you started with, unless you're Mujdart. I now have 4 mana. And I have produced 4 mana playing practically nothing. And so if you if you choose to stop the Phantasmal Ascendant, right, you only have, assumedly, 1 mana, because you had the 1 mana at the start of your turn. You're not really cheating mana. You would have to play other cards to cheat that mana out, because it filters away. So the issue becomes your turns become so explosive because of this extra free mana that you get for doing nothing, right? And so this is different than Mana Dorks, where Mana Dorks have a mana investment, right? So like if I go to my turn and I play a Flute, I have a 1/4 1-drop that has barrier and produces light will, right? It having barrier is really weird, but it has barrier. I still had to pay 1 mana to play that card. If you play a Final Battle, which is 1 mana and X, you can kill it. If you have non-targeted removal, you can kill it. If you have board wipes, you can kill it. If I play a different style dork, like any of the green dorks, Sacred Elf, Elvish Priest, etc., etc., you have Energize. You can spend your Energize, your single mana, to kill my dork that I spent my 1 will into. So we're trading will for will, right? Like I spent a will, you spent a will, and it keeps the game at a solid tempo. If you don't deal with it, then I'm going to go up mana, I'm going to play more cards, or higher mana costed cards, and I'm going to do it faster than you. But that's fine gameplay, right? because there's still a chance for you to deal with my dorks. There is still a chance for you to board wipe me. There's still a chance for you to do this other stuff. Okay? However, when you start to introduce ways to get mana for free without doing anything, then there's no real gameplay implication. I can't use my one Energize, my singular will of Energize, to deal with you having 3 mana on turn 1, let's say, right? So if you're Mylest Mooge, you have your Stone, you have your Mylest thing, and then you have an Umar and a Phantasmal Ascendant, which is 2 cards out of your 6, so now you have 4 cards to play. I have my 5 cards, but I only have 1 Energize. I don't really have anything I could do with that. You could Dinner Time and try and send out a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's not really healthy gameplay, right? It requires you to have too much interaction on the first turn, as well as specifically have green Energize, which just isn't really healthy for a game, right? It's not healthy game design. So I think what a lot of people have an issue with in these current like format is just how explosive the game has gotten, which you can kind of really see with the induction of Attack on the Demonic World, ADW. From ADW onwards, the game got incredibly quick, and cards got incredibly cheaply costed. Like, even if you look into, and a lot of that is not just ADW's fault, it's also ROL's fault. Because if you look into when Six Sage first came out, right, in MSW, Feasting Mujdart wasn't really the most played deck. People were playing like Gru's Ballesta Feasting or Almerius like Mujdart, Almerius Feasting, like other stuff like that. It was a much more like control-oriented game. It was a much more tempo-oriented game. Sure, a lot of people were doing the Makage Rhea into Final Stance, and then you were kind of down a mana. But that that was like the main design of that. And that's almost like kind of like a dork, right? An extra turn is not exactly a dork, but you did have to pay 3 will into it in order to get that. And there is counterplay around those types of effects. So, but we see a very clear difference moving into ROL, moving in with the advent of Lycion, like Storm Effect, Storm type deals, with Carlina existing. And then they printed Belial, which was meant to kind of be the control deck and slow everything down, but him slowing stuff down is literally, I can't lose the game, I can't lose the game, I can't lose the game, like 8 times. So it's you as a player having to have answers to this quote-unquote control deck that simply says, I can't lose the game for free. It's not really like that big of an investment, because the 2K life thing doesn't matter. We're not talking about that. Alice World is technically another example. You did have to wait multiple turns to get your Alice's Worlds. It's not like you were just slamming Alice's Worlds on turn 1. You didn't really get them off until like turn 3 or 4. And they were more of just like a win con after you slammed your Gwybers. More Gwyber was the win con anyway. So that's kind of the main issue, is you see this very obvious power creep and investment in free generation of mana. What is the Charlie ban list? We'll get into that. Free generation of mana that has caused the format to kind of spike very quickly. So if my personal ban list is huge, because a lot of the things that I think are unfun and people don't like in the format are cards like Fair Spell, Garyon. Counterspells that trade 1-for-1 mana-wise, I personally think counterspells should never trade mana neutral. That sounds so awful. They already trade card neutral, but in a resource-based game, counterspells trading mana neutral is honestly the worst possible thing ever. So like cards like Garyon, cards like Fair Spell. Fair Spell's a little bit different because Fair Spell inherently makes cards at sorcery speed play better. I personally think those types of effects are toxic for an environment. I think the best design of a counterspell is 2 mana. So like if you take a look, Seal of Wind and Light was an uncancelable counterspell back in the day. No one really complained about it. Like sure, there are the people who hated counterspells normally, but no one really hated it. And you had to pay 3 mana to make it unchaseable. I think the best version of power creep of a cancel spell that we've seen is Gale of the Wind from Kaguya, because it's still 2 mana, but it's just less mana intensive, because it's only 2 green, as opposed to green-white at Moon, and it produces you a Moon. However, I don't think Garyon existing is healthy. I don't think Fair's spell existing is healthy. Otherworld Dreams is a little bit weird, because you don't really cancel the card, they still get to play something, but, I mean, keep it on the ban list anyway. So, I think 1-mana counterspells just should not exist in any resource-based card game. Because with 1-mana counterspells existing, now you get into this thing where you have to have mana-boosting abilities, but now with mana-boosting abilities, those counterspells don't do anything. So you just don't play them. But the mana-boosting abilities cause the game to be so fast that now people are doing this turn 0 shit. And, like, turn 1, like, FTKs through you having council spells. And, like, other stuff like that. It just makes the game too quick. And I think they made all these, like, mana boost type effects and cancel spells to try and, like, counter each other, and it's just not working. So I would get rid of Garyon, I would get rid of Fair's spell. I think all law effects should be banned. Like, Atomic Turbulence should be banned. I think Dance of Spirit should be banned. I think Law of Silence should be banned. I think those cards aren't fun to play against, especially because they cancel so much more than they do in Magic. They're so much more impactful than they are in Magic. That they should just go and stay away forever. I think Phantasmal Ascendant should be banned, particularly because it's the one that you can pitch with Umr. So Umr's 0 mana, you get a free mana, and then you get to play a Cthulhu that gives you more mana. I just don't think that should exist. It's free mana. Sure, it's costing cards, but it's boosting you mana, and you're playing a ruler that gives you 6 cards if you go first, 7 cards if you go second, right? It's not really like you're at a card disadvantage against other normal decks. I don't like... they're also quick cast and can go before recovery, unlike MTG. That is also true. Plus, it can be a part of the Incarnate engine. Yeah, it can be a part of the Incarnate engine. That's like... I care less about that. I think Umr, like Umr itself, is a fine form of design for mana boosting spells, or mana boosting cards, right? Because if you think about the deck it was built for, it was Wolfgang, which has a 5-card hand, 6 cards if you go second, and Cthulhu's were just like this dummy OTK deck. It didn't give you free mana, right? Like, to spend on whatever you wanted. So I think that design is fine. So I think Umr can stay. Umr, the Grixis 3-drop, not the 7-drop that should be banned forever. And then, like Halo said, it being quick cast and being able to go before recovery, if your opponent... I recently made a deck list for Loki where you play on turn 0. You play, like, Loki enters the Game of Gods, play Dinner Time, and, like, play a bunch of Resonators, get Floodgates. If you try to do that, they can play Phantasmal Ascendant in response to you doing that by pitching Umr and then cancel your shit with, like, a Garyon because they got a Greenstone. And then they also still get to call a stone, and they also get Mylest's free red, and then if they're playing Isis, they get another redstone, and then you've spent all of your will for that turn, and now they have Isis and 3 stones, and then they're off to the races. Like, you just lose. So, that shit is inherently unhealthy. Dinner Time is questionable, partially because Dinner Time requires a mana investment. And then the other thing is it locks you into Resonators. So I'm okay with, like, restrictive mana boosts, but it can't be free mana. That's, like, my biggest, like, concern. Other things I would ban, I would just ban Tree. I don't think Tree really does anything, but it's also just not fun. I haven't met one person who says, yeah, I like playing against this deck, or I love playing Tree too. I don't think anyone has ever said that to me. I'm pretty sure anything anyone has ever said has just been, God, this deck fucking blows, right? So, Tree 2 should go. Just for the sake, it's more gatekeepery, right? It's the same kind of vein as, like, Violet, where Violet's existence is kind of like a gatekeeper deck, where it's like you have to deal with Atomic Bahamut. If you cannot deal with Atomic Turbulence silencing you into Atomic Bahamut, you will lose the game. So it's a gatekeeper deck in that sense. But if Atomic Turbulence gets banned, then you just have to deal with Baja, you just have to deal with Violet, and I think that's infinitely more fair. And a lot less gatekeepery. Tree 2 is also the same kind of gatekeepery thing, where you either have to have a loss of life effect, you have to have instant speed damage, you have to have Lorites, you have to have so much to just make the deck die. And so I just don't really think that's healthy. I think it's more gatekeepery and it's less fun. And it's less interactive. Like, all the deck does is they're just like, Callstone, 4 horns, here's my LSRs, right? I think they should ban Hanzo. That card is like the most cracked Resonator I've ever seen in my life. Not the Ruler, the Resonator. The 1-drop Resonator for Kaguya that got printed in Game of Gods. That card is just absurd. I've seen people be in such terrible situations for, like I've seen matches that have been like Kaguya versus another not I auto kill you deck, and it's been like the Kaguya player goes like, yep, quick cast Feasting without even countering anything to get a moon, move to my turn, flip it, call a stone, flip it back, Hanzo. X equals 2, bucko, and your opponent's just like, I lose. they just can't do anything. Or like, even if you deal with that Hanzo, they have And War It Shall Be, which is just 4 more copies of Hanzo. So they just keep going into Hanzos over and over again. And eventually he's just so big that like natural damage effects can't kill him, and you'll just have so many moons from other forms of moon generation that he'll just be able to cancel any chance that they have to deal with him. And then you just can't end up playing the game. I just think it's incredibly unhealthy. And the amount of mana he just gives, right? Like, if you even have 4 moons, you play 1 Hanzo, you generate 3 mana. It's like, it's kind of ridiculous. Your opponent can't do anything about it. You just have 3 mana by playing a Hanzo, by revving a Hanzo, because your opponent can't chase to the rev. So if it's any form of like sorcery speed, like you get to your main step to play a sorcery speed Hanzo, you generate X amount of mana, where X is your moons minus 1. Okay. Either Mujdart or Milas should be banned. There's a caveat to this, but the company will never do this. So, I think either Mujdart or Milas. Probably Mujdart and probably Milas. I don't know. I hate both of them. Milas because he produces free mana. Mujdart because it just makes... It's just like the best control deck because it's more resource intensive. But the extra card might be offset by like rune decks, so not really sure. I'd probably prefer Milas over Mujdart if they're going to do one or the other. But one of them. My other solution to either of those cards being banned, in order to promote like healthier format, would be remove the concept of tag entirely. It was a mistake. I think if you just got rid of the keyword tag, you could unban Feasting and Carlina. I don't think any of those rulers are inherently broken with just by themselves, right? Because like, you keep 6 Sage Stone banned. I hate that card. Keep it banned forever. But like Carlina, right? All of those decks, all Gruz Ballista, all Milas, all Mujdart, all of the tag decks that have a tap effect would have to play Ragstones. They would have to play Ragstones if they're trying to like use their tap effects effectively, which means they're playing mana down because they're not Ragnarok. So if you're Feasting, you can't like tap and Melfi on turn 1. Like, there's no difference between you calling a stone and then just tapping your ruler. So you would have to have a Ragstone in play in order for you to generate any form of value off of the Melfi tap. Same thing with Carlina. Carlina is probably the worst ruler I've ever fucking seen in my life, if you remove tag. Like, full stop. But it still allows like other rulers to be played, right? Like, you can still play Dante. Like, you can still play it as like a form of like control with its active effect. You can still play Belial as like another form of control deck, right? It's just that all of those decks get a lot worse. And I think part of the issue is their design with tag was so over the top. Because, like, again, if we look at the GP, there were 3 order decks and 5 tag decks in the top 8. It was 3 different order decks and then 5 tag decks. And tag lost its 2 most powerful rulers, and it's still just out here clapping. So, and tag was not the most represented deck by a mile. So it just needs to they just need to delete that mechanic. I don't know why they ever made it. But I personally think it inherently makes all of those rulers infinitely more fair. A lot of them just turn into turbo shit, but I honestly couldn't care less. For sales, I mean, yeah, like you want to boost it and you want to make the cards good for sales. Like that makes sense. It's the same exact thing Konami does. Like, and it's what Konami does with their ban list. Konami bans cards that are more impactful and create the format, and make the format more poor. But then, I mean, all of it is to push sales of like other decks, right? Like I can't remember the last time I saw a Yu-Gi-Oh ban list and I was like, wow, man, that really pushed Sky Striker players up out of there or whatever. Like they just don't do that. They ban cards that are printed approximately half a year ago that are in meta impactful decks. This is Yu-Gi-Oh, by the way. This isn't Force of Will. I'm talking about Yu-Gi-Oh. But so Yu-Gi-Oh's ban list ideology is they ban, if you've watched ban lists, they ban cards that are, or decks, stuff from decks, that are around for anywhere between 6 to 9 months in order to push the sales of cards that they think can compete, potentially, but might not be as powerful. Because, like, if you've ever looked at certain Yu-Gi-Oh formats, I think one of them is... So, if you ever watch any form of YouTube, watch Lithium 2300, his, like, cross-ban list series. He takes decks from all over different ban lists, full power, and pits them against each other. And it is borderline hysterical that some decks that are printed in 2022 are turbo shit against decks that are printed in, like, 2016. It is so funny. And so it's just, it's like, but so like that's ban list ideology, right? And that's fine. Like that's fine to do that. But, and ultimately that's like what people do, but Konami's maintained a healthy version of their game via doing that for the most part. So here's the question I put to you. We have 2 ban lists between now and the full shift to Wanderer. With that in mind, do you like this intensive list of ban lists or what needs to happen right now? So in my personal opinion, so my ban list, the final thing on my ban list would be you ban Magical Dragon. Because I think it's just too powerful with rune decks. Which is a weird enough sentence to say, but it's basically 0 mana and you ramp a stone because of rune decks. So that's the last ban that I have actually written down. So for doing it immediately or over the course of X, I think what'll happen is it will be over the course of X. If they ban even half of this list, I would be shocked. Probably some of the stuff that's on the ban list could also come off, but I would have to take a more like in-depth look at what's on the ban list actually. The other thing is I would like this all to happen in a singular list. Oh, also ban alternative Priscilla. You can't unban Gretel, actually. That card is actually unbannable as long as runes exist. But so... I think you should also ban alternative Priscilla. And the only reason I think you should ban alternative Priscilla, by the way, I don't think it's anywhere close to broken right now, by the way. With like the current meta we're in, I think that card is honestly turbo shit. But if you ban all this other stuff I'm talking about, that card is insane. It is absurd. And it also prevents... It limits design space tremendously, in my opinion. Call me a shill, but I have some good faith that at the end of the 2 ban lists, we'll see some really healthy changes. I will call you a shill every day to your face. But I mean, I have high hopes. They haven't they've still done hits even when we haven't had data within the data scope that we have had. So I think I trust them to an extent at this point, but I don't think they'll make a sweeping ban list change immediately on a single ban list. There is potential depending on what happens at these other two events. And we're also going to have another event between now and September for America in person. And so... So I hope that they take these bans into account for game design, right? Because like a lot of my issues is just with inherent game design itself. I think Lorite is a fine card to stay. I think having just a 1-mana Stifle, it doesn't cancel the card. It's the weakest body I've ever seen in my life. And then it actively does nothing in most decks. Like, it doesn't recur itself. It doesn't do anything. It's just 1 green mana, cancel like an enter. But like, every card has like 5 enters now, so it doesn't the Stifle stuff doesn't really matter. I think I think Lorite's like fine inherently. I think Feasting is fine inherently because it's a 1-mana counterspell, but it has to be played pretty much in a specific deck in order to be that 1-mana counterspell. And then it's not even a hard counterspell because you can still play other stuff to pump mana and then pay for the cost, right? So I think the largest issues that I have currently with how the format plays is I think there's too much free mana. And then I think because there's too much free mana, they've lowered the cap on counterspells and just cards in general and costs in general. Because I mean, even if we look at like the cards that they're spoiling like right now, right? Like Tree of Decay, it costs 0 if you're Athenia. Like, and there's so many other cards like that. All of Zeus's like effects, right? The attribute pie, whatever you want to call it. Only the first one is free. Which one? For the Zeus attribute stuff? You can just keep banishing them to chain them. Like, I get that it doesn't make all 4 free, but... Oh, the tree. Yeah. No. I know I know it's only free if you don't have another tree, but like it's that like kind of design. And they've done that with like plenty of other cards. But I think that's kind of like a hole they dug themselves into. So I think they can, if they reel back the design a little bit of super powerful 1-drop, so on and so forth. Because like, again, the safest cards in the game, and I say this in all of my Wanderer Wednesday videos, are currently 2-mana sorcery speed chance. Because no one has enough mana to pay 2 mana for a cancel spell. And the 1-mana cancel spells are canceling a 1-mana card, canceling a quick cast card, or a Stifle. So 2-mana sorcery speed chance are just the safest cards in the game right now. Which is the weirdest sentence to say. I can't set up dorks. They'll just get countered. I can't do whatever. My turn will just get countered. I have to pay... And then they also have this like tribal identity that they've been going with. In order to make cards that cost more, cost less, right? Like Prideful Rule. It's not a 1-drop. It's a 3-drop. It's like, I can't cancel that with Garyon. But there's Boon! There's third Boon, so I can cancel it with that. Virgilius in Dante. It's free. It's 3 mana, but it's free. Still cancelable with third Boon, but it's free. So they've just... A lot of the more powerful effects that we've seen are just cheating cards like that. Baja, right? It's 7 mana or 6 mana, but it's really 1. So I wish they'd reel back that design a little bit. That's like my ultimate hope for the long con. And I hope the ban list will start reflecting more of that. Because if we can get to a point where number 13 is like the best cancel spell in the game, I'm fine with that. Like, full stop fine with that. And then they never print anything better than number 13, mind you. I don't want to see any cancel spell in the future at all that's better than number 13. Just stop it there. But otherwise, I think they're doing okay. So we'll see with the next ban list whatever choices they end up making. And then, I mean, we'll have to see with the future where they go with, like, their design choices. I know with them saying they're going to, like, reprint sets, print stuff for older rulers, etc., that's nice and all, but I don't want to see, like, stealth support for Seer of the Blue Moon, where it's like, play this 1 mana card, search your deck for 5 stealth cards and set them. Give me Force of Will in Force of Will. Maybe. The issue is part of the issue with stuff like that is also the design of FOW, because it is so much easier in Magic, because your resources are a part of your deck, to screw yourself out of cards with effects like Force of Will. You can't do that in FOW. So it's also like a design differentiation, which I forget if I mentioned this recently to, like, the public in one of my videos, or if this was just a chat I was having, like, privately, but personally, I love Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the card game I play. It is my favorite card game to play. I really like FOW. I really like FOW's design. It is probably my second favorite game design outside of Gwent. But that's a whole different discussion. My thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! That drags me to it and makes me really like it is its archetypalness. I know that's not really a word, but and that's because you can be like, oh, I'm a Sky Striker player, I am a Atlantean player, I am a whatever player, for hire player, right? Like, you just have these archetypes that you can build into. And so FOW's kind of going with that, especially with the Order and Force Resonance whole thing. Like, you get to do, like, what is it, right? Like, I'm an Athenia player, because I like to play Force Resonance, Death, and Rebirth and all my shit. I'm a Typhon player, because I like shuffling for 5 hours every day. Right? Like, there are different design ideas that get pigeonholed because of Force Resonance, but that whole kind of concept is how Yu-Gi-Oh! Also promotes their decks. And I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh's had decent sales, so why can't FOW? So I like it personally. I like being like, oh yeah, I'm an X player. Like, I think that's cool. But resource-based card games don't normally build around that, which I think is a weird thing for a lot of players. Because, like, in Magic, you're not a... Right? Like, I'm not a Golgari Grave Troll player. Like, you can say I play Dredge or I play Spirits or stuff like that. Like, there are archetypes, but a lot of the time people don't fall into, yeah, like, oh yeah, I just play Tron. A lot of the time they, like, branch out in resource-based card games. So I think that's kind of like a weird thing that FOW has sort of dug itself into, but that's a different thing. But anyway, that is my thoughts on bans and other things like that. I completely missed this question, but it's kind of a Q&A section now. Anyway, how do you feel about 5-color stones? Do you think the format changes if not every deck can play Moonshade and run the one-cost good stuff? Providence, Laureate, Fairs. That is another thing that is incredibly important to talk about. 5-color mana stones that have no restriction are inherently bad for the game, because I mean, 200 life in the past was a lot, because it was a lot more, like, tempo-oriented. Now I just go from 40 to 0 because of Atomic Bahamut. But, like, a lot of the decks you see are just playing 4 Moonshade, because why not? Like, 200 life isn't anything. The interesting thing that will be... I think Moonshade should be hit. I think stones that, again, don't have a restriction on them. So, like, I think Ragnarok Stone, fine. Bradstone, we'd kind of have to talk about that one. The stones that are, like, produce a mana of any color, spend this only to play Tails or Villains, fine. Like, Star Fragment, terrible, fine. Like, all those kinds of 5-color stones, you can only produce it if you're Ayu, right? I think all that stuff is fine. But, I think Moonlight's fine. Moonlight requires you to have, like, other shit. have all the other colors. So I think all that stuff is fine. I don't think unrestricted 5-color is fine, which is why I didn't like Magic Stone in the 6 Ages, among other reasons. Moonlight, or not Moonlight, Moonshade, not really a big fan of. Like Ruler's Memoria is almost on the borderline, but at the same time, you'd have to fill your deck with the Regalia, and Regalia aren't as powerful / impactful as they used to be. So that's my thing on 5-color stones. Great combo, my friend. Great points, and let's see what they do with it. Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope they do well with all of it. Maybe it would be more like that if we had more consistent back support. Like if we got a new Chimera once a year, people would be more dedicated Fox players. Yeah, but I think a lot of that is potentially with the reprint sets, right? Reprint sets. They said I'm almost 99% sure they said that they were going to be printing support for older rulers with their like not Wander specific, but like new sets coming out after the shift. So I mean, I think if we get a new Chimera, we get more stealth cards, we get Change the World Unbanned. I don't know. Could you unban Change the World? Someone asked me this. I think Sam Colmer asked me this, if you could unban Change the World. I think in a world where you get rid of all the early game stuff, I don't think you can unban Change the World and let R&R exist. I think it would just be too much control value. And he would have access to Ruler's Memoria because you'd be playing those 4, and then you could get away with some amount of Death Scythe / whatever. And then you're kind of just in this, like you'd be like an old R&R deck, basically. I don't think that would be healthy, but maybe. But so yeah, but like if we get new stealth cards, new chimeras, new wanderers, right? play Adalbert. You saw I ended. Little did you know, I brought a second. Ha. You can't get me. I know you people. You're redeeming your hydrates. Give me new mystery cards. Mystery is a good one. New elementals for Greengill. We kind of got new strength cards in the form of Lilius. We could get new panda cards like they did with Tigris Pearlshine in ROL, right? Like stuff like that. Like it's nice to see that kind of stuff for people who want to play those cards or want to identify with those cards. But I think part of FAU's issue is a lot of the times in the past, it's just been, here's the set, here's the next set. The old set literally has nothing to do with this next set. And then they'll print the third set, literally nothing to do with those other 2 sets. And then they print the 4th set, and it has support for the past 3 sets. In some form. Golems for people who hate themselves. And they can even do like Ascended Ruler type deals, right? Make Pandora not shit. Buff the old Grim Cluster Grim. Buff the old Grim Cluster Abdul. Right? They can reprint all this stuff. Ascended Rhea. Like they have the potential to do all this stuff. So hopefully they do. Hopefully the new sets are decent and like have new stuff anyway and all that good old stuff. Oof, I wonder how OG Grim buff would be. And I mean a lot of like the Grim buff and like reprinting older cards, like cards with trigger, cards with stealth, cards that were spell chant instants, etc., makes them more readable for current players. So it's just better in the grand scheme of things for like new people coming into the game, right? Which is what we want. We want the game to grow. We want new people to come in. We don't want the game to be small and like a select few people know how the game works. Which is honestly how the game is right now. Only a few people know how this game works, and I'm half of them. And by half of them, I mean I am 1/2 of a person who knows how this game works. I do not know how this game works. But yeah, so that's going to be it for the day. If anyone had any other quick questions, I'll give you another couple minutes if you want to ask them real quick. Otherwise, I am going to call it a night. I do appreciate all of you coming in, hanging out, chatting, and all that good stuff. I greatly appreciate it. I just happen to be a high-level judge, but not know the game. Incredibly true. Incredibly true. I do just happen to be a high-level judge. We definitely read cards. I mean, Halo forgot to put players cannot chase to this card in his database text, so clearly Judge Stack does not read the cards. Oh, that's funny as shit. Not like this. Not like this. But yeah. Okay. Alright. I don't see anything. If we talked about banning 5 color stones, right? I did talk about banning 5 color stones. Or at least my thoughts on banning 5 color stones. I don't currently see anything. I'll look at my chat for a couple minutes afterwards, and I will reply to you in chat if anyone's typing out something long. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Again, this will be uploaded to my YouTube. If not this weekend, hopefully by Monday. We'll see. I don't have a great upload speed. But yeah, thank you so much. Hope you all have a great rest of your evening, and then I hope to see you all in my next Wander Wednesday video, as well as the tournament reports that I will hopefully be doing if I can get the data for the Mexico GP, as well as the EU GP. All right, have a great rest of your evening. Bye-bye.